Hi, it's Jules here, and you are listening to Jules FM. This week I had a conversation with Michael Klim, and reflecting on this, there were quite a few things that he said that really stuck with me, and honestly, challenged the way I think about my own goals. We all knew Michael Klim as world champion, the guy who broke 21 world records, the powerhouse in the pool, the Australian swimmer who revolutionised the freestyle stroke. But what I didn't fully appreciate until this conversation was just how he got there. And then, after achieving such incredible success, how he came to reinvent himself all over again, but in a very different way. And it wasn't what I expected. Of his swimming days, one of the biggest things I took away was Michael's approach to staying one step ahead of the game. It wasn't about being the strongest or the most naturally talented, he tells us that himself. In fact, it was due to what he saw as his own shortcomings that Michael realised he had to look elsewhere to find the answers. He wasn't as tall and didn't have the same reach as his idol at the time, so copying him was no longer an option. And that is what drove him to question his approach and consequently discover his own unique style. And I guess that made me think, how often do we get to a point where we try something that's been done or something that we know is successful for so many other people, only to find that it's not working for us and then just give up because we don't understand how they made it work, or it's not as successful because it's already been done. And it was just a really interesting mindset that made Michael take on that challenge and actually think, well, how else can I do it? And to go about doing it in a very different way. It was all about taking a risk and being willing to try things that other people weren't doing, which is really risky when you're at the top of your game or getting close to the top of your game, to try and then mix things up and do something that's never been done before. A huge leap of faith. But it was about backing himself and believing he could do it. And this is something I know I've struggled with in the past, and in fact, still do at times. Trying to do something that has been done before, but better. Or trying to sound like someone that's already successful. Or, someone who's already established, doing something in the same way. And not trusting in my own individual style. But wow, it takes incredible courage. And as Michael showed us, that is where the magic exists. And real success can actually happen when you take that step. Some of these mini risks that Michael tried with included experimenting with new technology, new suits, new training ideas, even when people thought it was strange or unnecessary or even a waste of time. And I won't spoil all of what he shared, but there is a moment in the episode where he explains how a tiny adjustment, something that most athletes would have ignored, ended up being one of the biggest advantages in his career. And that was what really got me thinking. Where in my own life am I relying on a habit or comfort instead of curiosity? Where am I waiting for a green light instead of just testing something new? Because Michael's success, it wasn't just about speed. It was about his mindset. That kind of thinking that says, okay, is there a new tool? Is there a new method? A new idea? A new sound? Something. I want to understand it. I want to see if I can make it better. The other thing that really hit me was how he talked about identifying gaps. Like, he paid attention to what other swimmers weren't prioritizing, things like diving technique, or small technical areas that seemed like insignificant at the time. And he asked himself, what if there's an opportunity there? This is just such a powerful way to look at your own craft. Not what am I already good at, but where is there space, or where's the space that no one else is looking? What is something different? What is a unique way I could look at this or approach this? And it's such a simple shift, and yet changes everything. It's a reminder, I guess, that sometimes your advantage isn't in doing what works for others, but backing the thing that works for you. I guess the part, though, that surprised me most was how All of that, the curiosity, the resilience, the willing to try, ended up serving him later in life in a way he could never have predicted. Because when Michael was diagnosed with CIDP, he wasn't just facing a physical challenge, he was facing an identity challenge. Imagine being someone whose entire life, purpose, and routine has been built around physical performance, and which his was. He was known as this incredible Olympic swimmer. It was all about his endurance and his prowess. And then suddenly, the thing that got him that success, his body, wasn't responding the way it had. And I won't share everything he opens up about. He tells it with a vulnerability that deserves to be heard in his own voice. But what struck me was how he had to reinvent himself all over again, and in a way that had nothing to do with athletic performance. He had to shift his perception of what strength looked like and redefine what success meant. He also had to learn how to let go of the version of himself that the world had always known, that invincible swimmer, and step into a new chapter with a different kind of courage. The reinvention he went through after his diagnosis wasn't fast or flashy, and in fact, he tells us that it took him a long time to make the adjustment. And not surprisingly, it was all he had known and all he had been recognized for, and we all have this need, I think, to feel valued or to have something that we identify with. And it wasn't about breaking records or pushing limits, but it was about slowing down, listening to his body, accepting help, and finding purpose in places he never had expected. And that's what really stayed with me, because it reminded me that reinvention doesn't always come with a big announcement. Sometimes it comes quietly, through acceptance, humility, and the willingness to rebuild from a completely different foundation. And for me, it actually came from a place that I hadn't experienced before, a great loss, and then that sparked me to reassess. But whatever the impetus and whatever that looks like, reinvention can bring with it a whole new lightness or understanding about who you are and what your strengths are. And after hearing Michael, I found myself asking again, where in my life am I holding on to an old version of myself? I know I've made this new step into this new realm, but are there still areas I need to look at? Are there still areas stuck in the dark that I need to uncover? And where am I resisting the change that's actually trying to teach me something? And how much potential is sitting on the other side of just simply letting go? What I learned from Michael is that you can be a champion more than once in your life, but you can't be the same champion. You have to evolve, you have to adapt, and you have to find meaning in new places. And the same mindset that made him extraordinary in the pool, curiosity, experimentation, discipline, tiny improvements, it's the same mindset that's helping him navigate this chapter of his life with such grace and strength, and bringing such meaning to not only him and his family, but to so many people. And to me, this is the real reinvention, and honestly, the real success. So that's what I wanted to share today, not a summary of the episode. You'll get that when you listen to part 1 and part 2, which are both incredibly insightful and well worth a listen. But the things I walked away thinking about: curiosity, experimentation, backing your own style, and looking for opportunity in places that other people aren't paying attention. Links to the Michael Klim Foundation and how you can help support sufferers of CIDP and their families through his organisation are in the show notes below. And don't forget to grab yourself a copy of his new book, Klim. It is an incredibly powerful read. Thanks for listening to this recap. If something here sparked you, follow the show and share this episode with someone who's chasing their dream. Until next time.